Now I can ask you this: by you being a historian of the Middle Ages, do you think that like movies and Hollywood have they done a good job portraying, what it was like back then? Because even growing up as a kid, it always seemed fascinating. You see the people with the armor, you see the wars and the different events that go on.
It's, to be honest, it's a mixed bag. There have been some good movies, and there have been some that I just have to shake my head and say, "Didn't you guys ask anybody?" um, but there was a really good movie that came out a few years ago called The Last Duel, about the very last judicial combat that was fought in France at the end of the Middle Ages. Uh, I forget who was in it. Um, it had some pretty big stars in it, but that was pretty well done. Um, yeah. On the other hand, even longer ago was a Beowulf movie, the with Angelina Jolie as the monster's mother. I don't know if you ever saw it. That one was kind of a joke. So it's a mixed bag. But sometimes I have to, as an historian, when I watch a movie or a TV show, I have to kind of put it to the side and say, okay, this is entertainment. Let's enjoy it. A good place to look if you're looking to get a better sense for what the Middle Ages was like were streaming TV series rather than movies. Uh, the best one that I saw recently was The Last Kingdom. It's set in early medieval England, and they do a really good job of bringing that world to life. So there are some good ones out there.
Okay, okay. I'm gonna definitely check those out for sure. You had mentioned something earlier about going to the museums. For the viewers, if you haven't, always take advantage of opportunities to go to museums. You find a lot of cool stuff, and I know a lot of museums they don't let you take pictures and videos, so everything is not on Google, everything is not in the books, and it's not online. So
Hmm. Yeah. A lot of museums will let you take pictures.
yeah, yeah, some still do for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, now I wanted to ask you. You had wrote a couple different books. If you could talk about, the process to writing these books and what inspired you. I wanted to ask you about Unjust Seizure. If you could talk about that.
Unjust Seizure was my very first book. Um, and the way it works in my field is when you go through graduate school, you have to prove to the profession that you know what you're doing. So you write what used to be called a masterpiece in the old fashioned sense that proves that you're worthy of being a master. Um, in this case, this book was my PhD dissertation that I then reworked, turned into a book, and published to show the rest of the profession that, yes, this idiot knows what he's doing. Um, at the heart of the book is a basic question: how does power work in a world of low technology where you don't have the internet, you don't have spy satellites or drones, you don't even have telephones or telegraphs? It takes 2 weeks to get anywhere on foot. You can only sail in good weather. Armies, an early medieval army, it numbers in the thousands, not in the tens of thousands or millions. So it's a very low technology, low power environment. But you've got a king, Charlemagne, lived around 800. That man ruled all of Europe. Okay. How does that work? How does one man in this kind of world get people all the way across a continent to care what he says? Okay. Well, Charlemagne was a very good general. And when he showed up with his army, you paid attention. Okay. But he couldn't be everywhere at once. So my question was, why do people participate in an early medieval regime? How does power work? And I was lucky uh, in that in southeastern Europe, a bunch of records from churches and monasteries survive. Local records, property records, people selling property to each other, giving property to each other, and more important, fighting with each other over property rights. They survive from about 750 to 950 were the ones I looked at. And so the idea I had was, okay, let's take a look at these and see. Charlemagne moved into that area in the 780s and took it over. And by 800, he's in charge. Okay, so my question is, who cares? Okay. So I look at these records of property disputes before, during, and after Charlemagne's conquest to see to what degree he mattered. You know, when people are fighting with each other over property today, you go to a court, and the court is a representative of the state. Okay. So that tells us the state is powerful. The state matters. The state helps us solve our disputes. I wanted to see if Charlemagne mattered. Before he got there, people are pretty much solving disputes by working out arrangements with each other, compromises. But after Charlemagne shows up, you start to see courts and judges and royal officials at these disputes. And you start to see, rather than compromises, you start to see decisions in favor of one or the other. And then I looked more closely at who was using these courts. And what I found was that I don't know what your family is like, but a lot of families fight with each other over property and over inheritance, right? What I found was that branches of families were using these royal courts to take property away from other branches of families. In other words, the courts were useful. I also found that Charlemagne's officials, the judges and whatnot, they came from local families. In other words, the short answer to how power worked in this period was that people found that they could use it for their own purposes. What made Charlemagne such a great ruler is he made himself useful. He made it to people's advantage to participate in his government, and they could use it in their own interests, which to me was an eye-opener, because that explains how a kingdom like that is that big, that doesn't have near the coercive power of a modern state, how it can work. And that is, people agree that it works because they find it useful. So that's basically what that book was about.